Great. And we're joined today by Evelyne White from bookalocal.com, based in both New York and Brussels, Belgium. And as what we've been doing here is not going over people's bios or the session descriptions. You all know what the session is about, and you can read the speakers' bios on the website. We'd like to maximize the time with speakers, so I'd like to just go ahead and turn it over to Evelyne and let her go ahead and do her thing. So, Evelyne, would you like to take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Evelyne White, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Book-A-Local. So Book-A-Local is, kind of the simplest way to define us is we're a social dining network. We're a platform or marketplace. You've heard these terms thrown around a lot. Essentially, we're matching two sides, two different types of customers. So on one side, we have our hosts, and on the other side, we have our guests. So you'll hear me talk about the two-sided marketplace, some of the challenges of the two-sided marketplace, and really how we are bringing people together through the marketplace to connect through food experiences. So now I have the control. So let me just make sure I can scroll through here. All right. So first of all, you guys all probably are familiar with booking a hotel room. I'm probably preaching to the choir, but you know that 5 years ago, if you were looking for something, you probably went straight to booking.com or to hotels.com or to one of these sites. And that's pretty much where you found your options. And you maybe get this so-so hotel at the Holiday Inn. Maybe if you had more budget, you go to the Hilton. And if you were my co-founder, Frank, those are actually his feet. You'd probably stay in a hostel somewhere. But the world of options is really changing. I think today, more and more people are turning to alternative sites. These are some snapshots from Airbnb. This one's in Miami. The next one is a snapshot from an apartment in London. This last one is from Couchsurfing. So again, if you're on that budget, you still have some options to work with. And so the world of options is getting bigger because of peer-to-peer marketplaces. It's not just the hotel chains and the hostels. You have sites like Airbnb that are really tackling the whole spectrum of the market. A site like One Fine Stay is really tackling the kind of the upper end of the market. You have Couchsurfing that's really connecting you for these free options for where you can stay. And now let's look at the world of dining. I think today, still, too often, you need a place to eat, whether you're in your hometown or if you're traveling, you try to figure out what the local reservation site is. You type in your city what you're looking for, and then you might get a table at this Italian restaurant. If you were on the road for work, you might just go down to your hotel lobby. You might end up sitting in a cafe by yourself. But today, there are actually lots more options, just like what was happening in housing. I'd say we're about 5 years behind, 5, 6, 7 years behind. In the dining space, these are pictures from real events that are taking place, that took place very recently. This is a host named Stephanie, who hosts dinners in Belgium. The next one is this is a host in, I think he's in Paris, and he hosts supper clubs. He puts these up on a social dining platform. Here's this lady named Kathy. She lives in Brooklyn, and she went to Costa Rica last summer. She learned how to make ceviche, and so now she's sharing this in her home. So similarly, what we're seeing, like you've seen in hotels, you've seen it in cars, you've seen it in lots of different segments of the economy. Now in dining, we're also seeing that it's not just the restaurant, the hotel lobby bar. You're really seeing another world of options opening up. And Book-A-Local is one of the leading platforms that's really making headway in this space. And our aim is pretty simple. We're looking to connect people using the power of food. Turns out wine and beer and whiskey and all these other things that we can consume are pretty powerful agents too. So let's see. I'm going to try to, not sure if that's going to work. Okay. All right, this is just a snapshot of a lot of different hosts. So to give you a little sense of Book-A-Local and our scope right now, I started as the first host. I started just over 2 years ago testing out in my own kitchen. I was living in Brussels, and I actually found that a lot of people that were staying with me through Airbnb and through couch surfing, I had an extra room, they all wanted to attend my events. And when I asked them why, it was because they said, well, we're looking to connect with people. And often what happens with Airbnb, particularly as it gets a little more professional, people just drop the keys off somewhere, and then you don't have really any interaction with the host. And what all these guests were asking for was this local connection. They really had a list of 10 to 20 questions that every single person had the same one. That was where do I go? Where should I not go? What's overrated? What's underrated? Where do the locals go? How do I call a taxi? What's the tipping policy? What are some cultural norms I should be aware of? And so I thought, okay, well, you can either book me for 15 minutes and just ask me a bunch of questions, or we could actually share a cultural experience and you could learn about the city or the country or all those customs and answer your questions, but through a meal. So started opening up these events to travelers and created a very simple website. I was the only host. I had about 3 different profiles. And then what happened was people started to come to the meals and they wanted to host themselves. And then the second thing that happened was that actually local people wanted to use the site as well. So whereas I initially thought that we were all really just going to focus on the traveler market, it turns out that particularly expats, people that are just moving to a new city, kind of starting from scratch, building up a social network, or local foodies were looking for ways to explore their city, their own city, and see what's happening in their own backyard. So we started off just me, very quickly started adding new hosts to the platform. Before I knew it, I was working a full-time job and a very demanding one at that, and I started spending all my nights and weekends, and 3 months after I started toying around with the concept, I turned in my notice, told my boss it wasn't him, it was me, and I really wanted to explore this world that I saw growing and just so inspired by what was happening in the peer-to-peer economy at large and with other sharing websites. So I started Book a Local. And the reason why I wanted to start Book a Local was because I saw that it was at the intersection of several really exciting trends. So the first is food. How many of you have heard of the term foodie, heard of the term wino? In the U.S. alone, about 40 million people call themselves foodies, which is a very high percentage if you think of the kind of the addressable market in terms of age and location. I mean, people are spending an increasing percentage of their income on high-end food and high-end experiences in particular. The second is social. You all know about Facebook. Facebook's mission was always we're connecting people. Very simple, we're connecting people, but they're connecting people online, and we're actually finding that more and more sites, like Meetup, for example, the popular one, they've got, I think, 17 million members today, and about a third of them belong to these food and wine groups. So we're seeing more and more people want to join social networks, but actually use them as a tool to meet offline and actually experience things in the flesh with people. And the third exciting trend is travel. Now, travel, it grows at different paces over time, but it's one of the few industries that did not get hit overall by the latest recession. Ticket travel sales continue to go up. The spend on food and experiences during travel also increased throughout the recession. So I said, now look at all these intersecting trends. I thought there's got to be something there. So this is when I ultimately came up with the idea and started to think, well, we're not seeing any peer-to-peer players in dining yet. And at the time, there really weren't any. You probably heard of a few. I mean, I could list about 20 competitors in this space right now. But at the time, there wasn't anybody that I knew of. And so I started talking to people, and they all said, yeah, but you're totally crazy. The common things that they came up with were, no one's going to want to eat with strangers. Who's actually going to pay to eat in someone's house? Also, just like there are concerns about what Airbnb is doing to the hotel industry and how the hotel lobby groups are fighting back, people thought, well, the restaurant industry is going to fight back. What about insurance? Somebody falls when they trip out and they leave the apartment. What if they steal your china or your forks or break something? So these are all a lot of the common concerns. that kept coming up. But I saw a tremendous amount of opportunity, and even though people were raising those concerns, I saw those concerns as opportunity. If you could answer those questions and find solutions to insurance or find solutions to bring in the restaurant industry, for example, then we could mitigate those concerns and really get to the exciting part, which is building a company that leverages momentum and peer-to-peer and sharing to connect people through food. So it's been 18 months since Book a Local launched our real platform. That first website I wouldn't even call a website. It was very funny. I laugh at it now. You couldn't do anything. I mean, you could see things, but you couldn't log in. You couldn't buy. Everything was totally manual. And so I put together a team of developers, and we started working on the website and launched it 18 months ago. And since then, we've had over 2,000 events created. I think we're up to 2,200. We've got over 10,000 active users. And the more exciting part is really the stickiness of the customers. So remember in the beginning I talked about our two types of customers. We have the hosts and the guests. Well, it turns out hosts, once they host with you once, if they have a successful experience, they just keep hosting. And they're very, very loyal. And similarly, guests, in particular the local guests, they use this site as their source of things to do, whether they're in their own city or whether they're traveling to a new city. So in our two core cities today, we've had guests, quite a few guests, use us between 20 and 30 times. At the high range, we've got 50 times. And we've seen the seats booked continue to rise every single quarter. We're seeing the seats booked, the number of users booked at an accelerating pace. Another thing that we've seen is even though we've only marketed Book a Local in 2 countries, actually really mainly 2 cities so far, we've had hosts sign up all around the world. We launched in Brussels mainly for a few reasons. One, I was living there at the time, but 2, it also had a very strong food culture. And the third thing that I learned made a city successful was the fact that tourists coming to that city were coming for a few different reasons, not all food, but it was in the top 3 reasons that people were visiting Brussels. So you're either coming to Brussels, if you guys don't, a lot of people don't even know where Brussels is, but it's the capital of the EU, borders on France and the Netherlands, Germany, but it's very known for chocolate, for beer, for waffles. It has a strong food culture, and outside of those 3 food groups, people are just incredibly talented in the kitchen. I've never, knock on wood, never had a bad dinner. I've never had a bad home-cooked dinner in Brussels, cooked by a Belgian. But so the thing that we figured out was also very important was that that traffic coming for food and also a transient population. It's a city where a lot of people come to work for the government, for the EU. The equivalent in the U.S. would be working for the State Department. And they come for an assignment of a period of time, and they're looking to build their network from scratch. And so this is just an incredible way to connect with people through these dinner parties, through these food tours, these beer tastings. It's not like going to a giant networking event. It's not like going to a bar. It's not like going to an overwhelming meetup group. It's always, a manageable size of people where there's quality exchange, and people love it. But we launched in Brussels, and then when we launched in Washington, D.C., we saw very similar trends, a similar population base that was interested in it. And then how people have found out about us in 46 countries, I don't really know. I suspect a lot of it comes from PR. We don't have a PR firm. We've never spent a penny on PR. But sites like CNN just picked us up as one of the top 10 websites that are changing the way people travel. And we've had some great coverage like that that's helped us reach. We've got a growing base in Italy. If you're looking to take a trip to Italy, just go on or check in with Book a Local, because you can go eat in a vineyard. You can eat on the beach in Cagliari. It's amazing. And then the members too have signed up. Members, these are the guests, people who create profiles and book meals. They've signed up in over 100 cities. And so our team, meanwhile, has also grown with the expanding guest and host population, and we're now 8 I have a co-founder, Frank, and he's the technical co-founder. He manages a few developers, and then our other employees are really people who have our feet on the ground in cities where we're launching. So our next city where we just hired someone is Boston. And so we hire someone who is really in tune with the food scene, who goes and finds all the supper clubs, finds the restaurateurs who want to do private events, find the cooking classes, find the food tours, find the cool off-the-beaten-path experiences that we can then market to our global growing customer base. This picture right here is from a host in Washington, D.C., who's one of our most popular hosts. And our goal really is to make it so that there are more and more and more opportunities for people to book tables like this, no matter where they are in the world. So this is her host and her co-host. So with that, I just want to open it up to questions. I've gotten a couple questions already, but would love to hear from you what, in particular, you want to know about in the food sharing space. Okay. So should I read off the questions that I'm getting, Eric?
Evelyne, why don't you let us moderate the questions? Sometimes some of the questions are really specific to people's specific needs, and we would prefer people to contact you directly with specific personal questions. So the first question is, what are your liabilities as they relate to health departments, serve-safe requirements, et cetera? For people in other countries, serve-safe is basically a certification that people can handle food safely. Do you fly under the radar? Do your customers need to sign waivers to hold you and your hosts harmless for food poisoning and the like?
Yes, great question, one that we get a lot. So a couple ways I'll answer. The first is that, there is a very gray zone, and the regulations, health and safety regulations, vary from city to city. And so we got very overwhelmed. In the very beginning, we looked at, okay, what is it in New York? What is it in Boston? What is it in Seattle? And then we found that they're in D.C., but then in all the counties around D.C., there are different licenses. So what we did is we studied the case law, looked for instances where home-hosted events were getting shut down. And we found that the ones where people were getting shut down were when they were actually operating restaurants, and there are definitions of what a restaurant is in your home. For example, again, these are also local definitions, but a restaurant typically has certain hours of business. It's open from X to Y time. It has a menu. You can walk in off the street. You can order from it. There's a certain frequency, a certain level of commercial activity being derived from it. So we decided to draw our line in the sand and say, someone who is hosting twice a month in their home and sells a fixed menu and sells tickets to an experience is very unlikely to ruffle feathers, or as this person put it, can basically fly under the radar. We never saw any cases of people being shut down or getting notices from the health and safety department for that. So the way that we deal with it for now is that we tell people who are hosting in their homes that they cannot host more than twice a month. That leads nicely into the next part of my answer is that we mitigate our own risk as a website by making sure that we have content that's across venues. So more and more of our hosts are hosting in licensed spaces, a lot of communal kitchens. There are kitchen incubators that rent out spaces. We're seeing people hosting in small businesses. For example, our most popular gelato tastings are done by a guy and his wife who own a little gelato shop, and they do tastings in a little private room in the back. So you're not eating in his home, but you are getting this unique, authentic experience. And we encourage hosts to do that. And we actually have a list of spaces that are available in every city that we're in so that people can pair up with licensed venues. And yes, also both hosts and guests sign waivers. It's in the terms of use, so every single time you book, you've got to check the box that you have signed off. And technically, the host is liable, not the site, although in court, someone could still sue us just like they could sue a host. And we are working on insurance options so that hosts are protected. They would have to pay in addition, pay to insure their event, but they would be able to insure themselves from theft and any lawsuits for itemized reasons.
It's a new territory. It's kind of like Airbnb. I mean, you're still finding your way, and I think that hat off to you for pioneering in this field. It's fascinating, and it's one of the reasons why we identified it as an emerging trend in food tourism. But yeah, I mean, I think that all it's going to take is someone to with some nefarious objective, and you hear about it in the news, and but I like the idea of people hosting in commercial spaces or in the commercial kitchen area. I think that it provides a layer between people's private lives and the lives of complete strangers. But then, there's the other option too. It's nice to have new guests in your home. So, it's a give or take type situation.
Yeah.
Next question. How do you go about getting Book a Local into a new city that does not currently have it?
When you go onto our site, if you type in a city and we don't have anyone there, you can enter your email address and we let you know as soon as we do. We also then prompt you to invite anyone in your network to become a host there. I'd be interested in knowing if that person is talking about being a guest or being a host. The reason I ask is because you can host anywhere. We don't need to be in your city. If you're in Seattle and you want to host in Seattle, you can just put up a posting in Seattle. Now, we ask hosts in Seattle or new cities to be patient because that's not where we've built up a lot of community. So you're hoping that somebody stumbles on your profile and finds you, which does happen a lot. But there's nothing precluding anybody from signing up anywhere in the world. In fact, last week, a woman signed up to host a lunch in a suburb of Athens, and I thought, people in suburbs are just harder to book at this point because the community is still small, right? And people prefer cities at this stage. But the next day, a food blogger from Lithuania booked that lady in Athens with her husband and 2 friends for dinner. So you never know. So you should put up your profile wherever you are.
Well, I haven't tried it yet, but I'm looking forward on my next trip. I definitely want to do this. It sounds like a lot of fun. Now, how do you handle the language barrier? And I imagine it's probably on a country-by-country basis. I know when I was in Sweden a couple years ago, there's a small town in middle Sweden that does something like this, but it's not through your organization. It's through the local tourism office. But most of the people speak English, and so or German or Norwegian or whatever. So there's usually a language that can be matched. But what if someone is going to a country where the language is challenging?
So right now, our site is only in English. We don't translate it yet, and we ask the host which language. It's a mandatory field. They have to say which languages they speak, and then we ask them to set a language for the meal by writing in the language. So for instance, if you search Italy, you'll see some of the profiles turn up in Italian, and it'll say the host only speaks Italian. So that's great for either a local or a traveler who speaks Italian. But you won't book it and you won't even be able to read the menu or the description if you don't speak Italian. You can filter search results, filter hosts by language as well. So if you're coming to New York and you want someone who speaks French, you'd probably find me. You'd find anyone who speaks your language, even if it's not the common language of the country.
So you definitely have some accommodation built in for that, which is great.
And actually, the most important, that's actually one of the first lessons we learned when we set up Book a Local is language, in addition to things like pet allergies and smoking preferences. I mean, all those things are really important, but language is the number one. If you show up at a dinner and you can't communicate with the host, it's miserable for everybody.
But is eating and drinking a universal language? I mean, we could just stare at each other and be eating great food and smile, right?
Yeah, that's if all of you are doing that. But if 3 people are talking and having a blast and you can't understand, then you feel a little left out.
That's true. Next question from Russia. Who are your main customers, the tourists from other cities and countries or locals?
Right now, it's about 25% travelers and 75% locals. But local is kind of flexible. It can mean someone who's recently moved, but they live in that city. We're seeing the percentage shift more and more. So as we're able to get global PR opportunities in travel, we're seeing more travelers get interested. But there's a tipping point where, once you're in so many cities that you're attractive to so many people, then you become a much better tool for the traveler. Right now, we are a much better tool in the short term for people who either, live in Brussels or live in D.C. or live in New York, live in Boston. And so as we expand, we'll see a higher percentage of travelers come in. And the good thing is that the groups really like each other. I mean, I've been to dinners where there are 8 of us, and 5 are New Yorkers, and then there's 2 Australians and 1 person from France. And it's a great mix, because actually locals love having some outside flavor mixed in, and the travelers don't want to just eat with travelers, right? So it's almost, to have a great experience, you want a nice balance of the 2.
Indeed, and it keeps you out of those tourist trap restaurants too, right?
Yeah, exactly. The whole point is locals, if you want locals at your meal.
I wish you existed. I took my honeymoon in Tuscany, and I ended up at a restaurant that looked decent in Pisa, and it was such the tourist trap. The food was horrible. It was expensive. The waiters were surly. Had I known, I could have had a nice locally made fresh pizza in someone's home.
Yeah.
How do you recruit your hosts?
So in core markets, so let's say, okay, we'll take Boston as an example. So we're launching there right now. I wrote a playbook. It's a playbook that we can use to replicate Book Local in cities around the world, and it really is a step-by-step process of how to find hosts and how to find the best hosts and how to get them on board, and then there are other steps after that. But we use a lot of social media, so Twitter and Facebook groups. We use plenty of Google. I mean, you search for supper clubs or a lot of cookbook authors, people who host cooking classes. We go to culinary schools. So we have kind of a list of the places we go to recruit online in the flesh, and we'll find people who are passionate about food. And you show them this tool and convince them that there's a good value proposition for them, and most people love the idea of signing up, particularly ones that don't have a really great website because they haven't been able to invest in it themselves, and they want to do this. They want to do more cooking classes. They want to do all these things that they couldn't really do on their own because they lack the technology platform. The other bit is that we also we do work, so we are not exclusively in homes. If you go on our site, you'll see it varies city by city, but we do have a mix of restaurants and homes and bars and other venues. And we do that on purpose because a lot of our customers said that they wanted, let's say, the private dining in a restaurant. We don't work with any chains, but if you're an independently owned and operated restaurant, you can absolutely host in your space. So the other thing we do then to recruit the right restaurants is we go to a tool like, tools that are available like OpenTable and Yelp, and screen all of their lists and then search for the single locations where the proprietor is on site. And so then we go and we talk to those that we are really authentic. And that requires going into the restaurant and sitting down with them and showing them the platform and getting them to sign up.
Okay. The next question is what other countries you're in, but I think people can just go to your website for that. So I'd like to move on to how you assess a potential market and gain traction in a new market.
Okay. So we assess a potential market and decide to go into a market by looking at a variety of factors. One is one is the market size, the market opportunity. So, for example, we probably wouldn't go to a town with 20 people in it. But similarly, we also decided not to go to the biggest cities first. So there's a mix of market opportunity as well as competition. We didn't launch in New York I'm from New York, but New York is an insanely crowded market with people live in shoeboxes, restaurant culture is rampant, there's just so many new things to try, and there are about 80 things competing for your time on any given night. So New York is a really tough place to cut it, especially with a new platform, a new concept. So we chose to go after the kind of mid-sized cities that were either listed as fairly, well-established or up-and-coming food cities. We look at where chefs were, starting. You look at where Michelin stars are, and you look at where a lot of chefs are moving to. And then another layer that we look at is then the addressable population of guests. So we look at where tourism plays into kind of the ranking on the list of reasons people come to that city, and what food spend is. So we take all that data and look through a list of all of our potential cities. We started with a list of about 3,000 cities, and then we narrowed it down to the top 50 that we want to launch in. And then the way that we decide to go after, Boston versus Chicago is based on the talent that we find. So when I find an incredible person to launch Boston, I launch Boston. Had I found an incredible person to launch Chicago first, we would have gone to Chicago first. How do we gain traction in that market? Traction, again, is on the host. You've got to look at hosts and guests equally. For guests, it's really about building partnerships with local organizations, local tourism agencies, hotel concierges, digital marketing. So we invest in Google ads, Facebook ads, et cetera, targeting, travel and local populations.
And how does Book a Local make money?
We take a cut of the fee. So we only take 10%, which includes credit card fees, from the amateur hosts. And so if you sell a ticket for $20, that means someone pays $20 and you get $18.
That's a very modest fee.
Yes. It's a very modest fee. In the long term, you look at a lot of sites that are very successful today, they change their pricing model over time. In the beginning, what's most important to us is that we gain traction and that we gain credibility and that we build a site that's useful and that drives people to it. So you can't start off with a site that's in development, that's like a baby learning to crawl, and charge people 20% or 30%. And at the same time, it is important for us to monetize in some way, mostly just to confirm that what we're doing is valuable. And we also right now we don't do any advertising. We don't want to distract people, but over time we could entertain maybe some partnerships with travel companies or even some food brands, like high-end food brands or shops, Williams-Sonoma, Jose, those types of brands.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, if someone wanted to get started as a host, what would be the minimum set of requirements, in terms of insurance, venue, cooking ability? What do they need to get started?
They don't need they need a computer. They need a computer to get started, literally. They describe one or as many meals. Some people have like 20 or 30 offerings that they describe. Now, once you submit the meal, you get prompted to become verified. And once you submit that request, goes out to our network. So if we have anybody in your city who can verify you, that means a member of your network, not necessarily an employee of Book a Local, but it could be an active community member, an active guest. So if you have someone who can verify you, that person comes, they bring a date, plus one, a friend, a spouse, and they come over and they test your meal. They meet you, they take photos of the space, so they check out the space and ask you, run through a list of questions. So there's a higher hurdle to becoming a verified host. To become verified, then you need to get 2 thumbs ups from the verifiers, and you need to get a certain score on the star rating. We're not looking for you to be a top chef necessarily. That's great if you are, but we really are looking at a number of criteria from just your warmth as a host, the cleanliness of the space, and we've seen successful $5 menus and successful $200 menus. But the most important is that we feel safe letting somebody into your space, and that you're a warm host who can communicate. So if you get verified, then you have a verified stamp, you have 2 reviews, and it's much, much, much more likely that you'll get booked. If you remain unverified, either because you don't want to get verified or because you're in a faraway city where we just don't have someone, unfortunately, on the ground, it's harder for you to get a booking. We do ask about insurance. We don't require. A lot of people who host in their homes are actually covered to some degree by homeowners insurance, but we don't go through each of your policies. It's just, we just don't have the bandwidth, unfortunately. And that's about it. If you're a home host, then you're just limited to 2 times a month, and it's pretty simple.
Okay. There have been a couple questions about working with tourism offices. So to what degree do you work with tourism offices, and what kind of considerations do you take into account, and how might tourism offices get involved with you?
Oh, I see a question. Oh, is that different from, are you getting, okay, so tourism offices, or are you including destination management offices in that?
I think the further down questions, the destination marketing organization, that's the same as a tourism office. That's just industry jargon.
It is the same?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I was just talking to an incentive travel company the other day that mentioned we should be working more with DMOs and with tourism offices, because that's where they go to get their information. So the answer is we don't work with them as much as we would like to. In Brussels, we have a very close connection with the tourism office there, and they're one of our biggest sources of traffic. And actually, when I launched Book a Local, they were the first place I went. I said, I want to make sure I have the local, I want the tourism board on our side. I want to know that they're not going to fight us. So that was my real fear. Are they going to say, what the heck is this, illegal website? And they didn't. They saw the site, they were thrilled, and they said, give us your press release when you're going live. We want to help. They wrote up a few snippets, and they're a great source. Now, we have yet to replicate that in more markets. But in DC, we started to talk to local travel agents. We've seen online travel agencies reach out to us and want to be a part of the platform. We haven't really figured out how that would work yet. And then the DMOs, they are literally as of 3 or 4 days ago on our list of people to pair up with.
Great. Okay. Might have some ideas for you on that too later, Evelyne. So let's follow up later on that. Adnan asks, what is the main nationality that uses your site, and also what is the most popular international destination for people booking a meal with the host?
The biggest, in terms of volume of our web traffic, is the U.S. Very closely behind is Belgium, since that's where we started. And then the most popular destination is Italy. Actually, well, I look at behind our 2 core markets, Italy would be the non-core market that gets a lot of traffic.
Okay. And can you explain how you work as a host with supper clubs, underground dining, and existing food businesses? Do you share revenue, marketing, customer contacts, etc.?
So with if a supper club wants to sign up, wants to put their event on Book a Local, there's no revenue share. I mean, we're basically, like, think of us as a highly specialized, curated Eventbrite, right? So we charge a fee, and that fee really, it goes to cover, a credit card transaction fee that we can't get around. And then a small excess is about 6% that's left over that tries to keep the lights on and all the work that we do. So if a supper club's selling tickets, we don't treat them any differently, really, in terms of that fee. We don't take any of their revenue. We just take the host commission fee. But what we've done to accommodate private supper clubs and underground hosts is that we've made it so you can put your own code on like a private code, and then you can choose to only disseminate that code to people in your network. You can also choose the timing around when you want to release a menu or release the location. Like, some people don't want to release the location until 24 hours before. So that's fine. We can accommodate that. And more supper clubs are just using the private code feature.
This is a nice feature. So what do you find is most important to your users, the food or the host? So which one would be the critical factor for a user? And basically what it boils down to is, can someone who's not a great cook be a great host?
Yes. I'll answer that one first. I mean, there's a certain threshold, right? There's a minimum quality that you have to deliver for people to enjoy. What I recommend to people is if they're not really great cooks, you don't have to host a dinner. So you can create on Book a Local, you can create wine tastings, a cheese pairing. You can do a food tour where you take people to your favorite food trucks. You can do a bar tour, is one of our most successful ones. You can do really any number of experiences. You do not have to host a full-blown dinner. And I encourage you not to do that if that's overwhelming. It's really not cut out for everybody. The best hosts have a combination of both. But I would say if you had to pick one over the other, it's the warmth. It's how you receive people, how you talk to them, how you engage guests in conversation. For example, the other night I had a dinner where there were two people from Sweden who were a bit quieter, and then there were two New Yorkers who were pretty loud, and then there was someone in between. And as a host, I see it as my job to make sure that everybody feels included, and to help maybe to engage someone who's a little bit quieter, to make everyone feel good. And that's just as important or more important than whether my chicken was 5 stars or 3 stars.
We have a couple questions about verifying hosts, and you talked about the process a little bit, but I guess one person was asking about how do you make sure the host isn't up to something devious, and I don't know what is meant by that, but maybe are there any kind of unpublished safeguards that you check on when you go do a site inspection? Yeah, well, and this is a little bit subjective, but I think all of our users and all of our verifiers know what we're talking about when we say, would you feel comfortable? Did you feel comfortable? And would you feel comfortable sending someone you love? Would you send your son or daughter or best friend to this house? If the answer is no, then the person is not verified and they get off the site. And that's happened on a few occasions. Most of the time what might happen is, or more often, you might walk into the house and it's a lovely host. The food was even good, but the house was pretty messy and there were 5 cats running around. So early on we figured out how to write about that. So you'll see in the comments it'll say, if you're looking for a really authentic crepe from Brittany and you love to talk about French history, this is an awesome place for you. But if you don't like cats and you're a neat freak, or don't go.
And then we take photos of the space so you see it. You see it as it is, and you're not surprised. We've never encountered a host that was up to something devious. One of the safeguards we take is that we require all of the hosts to have a co-host, and we don't let you host single guests. That's just for safety. I do not want one-on-one dinners going on. It's just not worth the risk. And I'm sure they can be fun, but it's also, there's just too high of a risk that it doesn't go well. So 2-on-2 or 2-on-3 is more fun.
Yeah, that could get a little weird, I suppose. We only have time for a couple more questions here, so I'm just going to pick and choose. And Evelyne, why don't you, I don't know if you would like to take questions from people, but if you'd like to type in your email or Twitter or phone number or any means by which people might be able to contact you, if you'd like to accept any comments or questions later from people. One question was, I noticed that your company name, Book a Local, doesn't actually reference food. Do you ever have plans to move into other realms provided by locals?
Yes. Yes. When I first started thinking about Book a Local, it really was about accessing a local. You'll notice it's spelled with a K. We also have the URL with a C, so you can type it however you want and you'll find us. But local is spelled that way where we started in Belgium, and pretty much all the European languages are spelled that way. I think locale in Germany actually has a second meaning of home. So, but yeah, certainly our objective in the long run is to be able to add other types, a tour with a local, a walk in the park with a local, another type of local experience, a local music experience. That's why you see some of our competition has cook or eat in the name, and we didn't do that on purpose. Good.
All right. Last question. Do you give your hosts any guidance on meal pricing, and what about selling alcohol?
Yes, we give them guidance on meal pricing is that we tell them to charge roughly at a maximum what you would charge in a restaurant. So, for example, in Brussels, I can expect to pay 30 euros for dinner. If I go out with my friends and I order a main course and a couple glasses of wine and maybe something else, I'm going to pay 30 euros. We see our Book a Local hosts coming in at around 25 to 30. If you're charging a premium to that, you really have to be doing something very, very, very special. One of the biggest challenges for us is communicating to the guests that cooking at home is actually quite expensive. Some people think, well, I should be able to book a dinner for $10, and it's just not true. You don't have the scale of a restaurant. You don't have, you're taking time out of your day to go shopping, and then you're serving, and then you're cleaning, and ingredients are more expensive. So we're educating our customers on that fact, but for a while, I think it'll take a little while before we can start charging more for our dinners.
I just have one quick question that I've always wondered about. It seems to me that this would be, because sometimes when you eat out, there's the price, but by the time you add in a service charge and or tax, you could be paying 25% more for dinner. In a place like Brussels, the tax is included, but are hosts required to add in taxes and or service charges to the fees they charge?
They're not required to add a sales tax, although we do have a field for tax and tip if you want to add it. The only people who add that right now are restaurants. Restaurants have to charge that. Whereas there really is a gray area, and we can talk about this maybe on another call, but when you're selling tickets to a private function in your home, which is legal in many places, you want to do a fundraiser, or you have a band coming over and you're going to serve pizza or whatever. You can charge for tickets, and those are not as clearly taxable as as a meal in a restaurant, for example. So, and that the regulations will change as they are for hotel taxes on Airbnb properties, for instance. If the market gets big enough, it'll push the regulators to pay attention. But we are equipped to add sales tax if a host wants to. They
Great.
do have income. That's the only thing. We do require them, and we send out an overview at the end of the year of everything that you've earned, and we expect it's up to you to keep track of your receipts and expenses.
Okay, good. Is there any way that someone could get a hold of you if they would like to? Should they just go to your website, or what do you recommend?
Yeah, well, if they want to get a hold of Book a Local, can I send this to...
You can put it in the chat.
Everyone? Oh, there we go, everyone. Okay, I'm typing right now. If you have a question that's about Book a Local broadly, you can go to concierge at Book a Local, and that sometimes it gets assigned to whoever the best person is to answer it. So if it's a technical question, right, it won't go to me. If it's but there are 3 of us on that all the time. And if you need to get in touch with me specifically, there is my email. And I'm also very responsive there. And there, so someone's on Twitter all the time. So I would say Twitter or email. Twitter's probably even faster.
Excellent. Evelyne, thank you. This has been wonderful. Thank you for validating what we covered in our 2015 Food Trekking Monitor as one of the hottest new trends in food tourism. You've provided a wealth of information, and I, for one, look forward to learning more about what you guys do, experiencing one of your meals, and doing more with you. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye. Thanks for organizing, Eric.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks.